All right, let's get right into this, because it's a wild story. Just imagine for a second. The U.S. government grinds to a halt in a shutdown. And then, out of absolutely nowhere, a single anonymous donation of $130 million shows up, and it's all earmarked to pay the salaries of American troops. I mean, this is something that just doesn't happen. It set off this huge political and legal mystery. Everyone was asking, who on earth would do this? And maybe more importantly, why?
Well, the official story, at least the one coming from President Trump, was completely shrouded in secrecy. He called the donor a friend and a great patriot who wanted zero recognition. And that just threw gasoline on the fire of speculation. Think about it. We live in a world where big donors usually want their name on a building. So this level of secrecy, it was bizarre. It just made the whole mystery that much deeper.
And to really get why this was such a bombshell, you have to remember just how chaotic things were at that moment. The federal shutdown wasn't some abstract political fight. It was causing real pain for people. And it meant that 1.3 million active duty service members were looking at the very real possibility that their paychecks just weren't going to show up. And then this number pops up, $130 million from a single person. Now, when you do the math, it's about $100 per service member. So, it's more of a symbolic gesture than a real fix. But the sheer size of the gift just sent shockwaves through Washington. It wasn't really about the money itself. It was about the statement it made.
So a secret this big isn't going to stay a secret for long, right? The question on literally everyone's mind was simple. Who is this mystery benefactor? Well, it didn't take long for the press to find an answer.
And here he is. The New York Times broke the story, unmasking the donor as Timothy Mellon. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he's an heir to one of America's most legendary banking fortunes. He's the grandson of Andrew Mellon, who was the Treasury Secretary almost 100 years ago. And Timothy himself is famously private, really prefers to stay way out of the public eye.
So who exactly is this guy? Well, he's not just some heir living off a trust fund. He's a retired railroad magnate with a massive personal fortune. We're talking billions. He lives a super quiet life out in Wyoming, and it's worth noting, has a history of making some pretty controversial public statements. So a very complex, very reclusive figure who is suddenly at the center of a national firestorm.
Now, here's what's really interesting. While Mellon himself avoids the spotlight, his money is anything but shy. It turns out he's become one of the single biggest political mega donors in the entire country. Just look at his spending in the 2024 election cycle. You can see the vast majority of his money, we're talking over $100 million, went straight to pro-Trump groups. Tens of millions more went to other Republicans and Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s campaign. This isn't just a simple donation, it's a massive political investment.
Okay, so you've got what looks like an act of patriotism on one side, but it's coming from a political mega donor on the other. And that collision, as you can imagine, immediately sparked this fierce debate. Not just about the ethics of it all, but about whether his $130 million gift to the government was even legal.
And at the very heart of that legal fight is this law, the Anti-Deficiency Act. Now, this is a really foundational piece of U.S. government finance. Its whole purpose is to protect a core constitutional idea, that Congress, and only Congress, controls the country's wallet. Basically, the government can't spend money it hasn't been officially given by Congress. It's all about who holds the power of the purse.
And this lays out the legal standoff perfectly. The Pentagon's argument was, hey, we're allowed to take this money under our General Gift Acceptance Authority. But critics immediately fired back, saying that totally misses the point. They argued, sure, you can accept a gift, but you can't spend it without Congress signing off. The idea of taking private cash to fund a core government duty, they said, could be a straight-up violation of the Anti-Deficiency Act.
And beyond the legal battle, you had watchdog groups like Crew sounding the ethical alarm bells. And their argument is pretty fundamental, right? In a democracy, the government is supposed to be funded by its people, through taxes, which our elected representatives then decide how to spend. So letting a billionaire just swoop in and pay the bills, they argue, sets a really dangerous precedent.
Democratic Senator Chris Coons took that worry even a step further. His point was, look, if a rich American can do this, what's stopping a foreign country or a giant corporation from trying to do the same thing? It opens the door to the idea, or even the reality, that our military could be bought and paid for by private interests, and that is a deeply unsettling thought.
All of this, of course, leads to the billion-dollar question, or, in this case, the $130 million question. When somebody gives this much money to campaigns and to the government, what do they expect to get in return? And this is where the story takes a truly bizarre turn. one that leads us to a decades-old obsession.
Okay, this is where things get weird. It turns out that Timothy Mellon has a well-documented, very personal obsession, solving the 1937 disappearance of the aviator Amelia Earhart. And we're not talking about a passing interest here. He has personally spent millions and millions of his own dollars funding private expeditions to find her lost plane.
Now just look at this timeline for a second. Is it a coincidence? Let's walk through it. Back in 2012, Mellon funds an Earhart search. A decade later, he's in a legal battle over it. Then in 2024, he makes those enormous donations to pro-Trump groups. And then, in 2025, President Trump announces that he's declassifying government files related to Amelia Earhart. The sequence of events is, to say the least, striking.
So you just can't avoid the question, was this all just a massive coincidence, or was the declassification of secret government files related to a billionaire's personal passion project, some kind of subtle payback for his absolutely staggering financial support? We don't have a definitive answer, but that powerful correlation has fueled some intense speculation about how politics can sometimes work.
So let's zoom out from this one fascinating, kind of strange case study and talk about the bigger picture. Because this whole episode really forces us to confront some fundamental questions about how a democracy is supposed to work and how it's supposed to be funded.
To really get the scale here, you need some perspective. Look, $130 million is a ton of money for one person to give. But it's just a tiny, tiny sliver of the $600 billion budget requested for military pay in 2025. This really drives home the point that the donation was much more of a political statement than a real financial solution, which, again, raises more questions about what its true purpose was.
So what's the bottom line here? What are the big takeaways? First, having a private citizen fund a core government function like the military throws us into a really murky legal and ethical gray area. Second, it just blows up our whole idea of government transparency. Third, it's a crystal clear example of how immense private wealth can intersect with and maybe even influence public policy. And finally, it completely blurs the line between what looks like a patriotic gift and what might actually be a strategic political move.
And all of that leaves us with this final, really critical question. The power of the purse is supposed to belong to the people, exercised through their elected officials. But when private money can step in to pay public servants, whether we're talking about soldiers, teachers, or firefighters, you have to step back and ask, who's really in charge here? It's a question that really gets to the heart of what we want our democracy to look like.